A lot of people are starting to pay a little bit more attention to this, who really see what's going on, because they're concerned with looking over at Turkey. And what is your understanding of how Turkey is playing to all this? Because Israel has said on a number of occasions, at least some leaders here in the last few months, that once Iran is finished up, then we're going to look back over at Turkey. How is that playing in, and what is going on in Turkey, as far as you know, towards this?
So the Turks, haven't. Sorry, I've got a dog under my desk, and so it's. The Turks haven't made as much public noise about this as they did about Gaza. Now, of course, with regards to Gaza, what they did was essentially just make noise. And the same thing, too, with regards to Lebanon in 2024. The Turks made a lot of noise about it. Erdogan, said he was going to do something about it. And, of course, the Turks were never going to put their F-16s over Beirut or anything. When we're far away from seeing that. The Turks are not friends with the Iranians, and the Turks, certainly understand Israel, as you just described it, as seeing them as the next power that Israel has to contest for Israeli dominance. The Turks certainly have the largest army in NATO after the United States. They see themselves not just as a regional power, but as an aspiring world power. But they also understand that they cannot confront the United States and Israel in any manner that's going to have in any way that has an actual effect. So certainly, I think Erdogan and the Turkish government will put out statements. They will try and cast Erdogan as protector of the Muslim people, try and harken back to the days of the Ottoman Empire, when there was, by and large, peace throughout many parts of the Ottoman Empire for long periods of time, and try and establish Turkey as the logical leader for the Muslim world in the Middle East or in the world following this war. There's a lot of, I think, hedging. There's a lot of positioning right now.
You talk about people playing the long game a while ago with Iran, but yeah. To what extent might Turkey be wanting to play the long game and saying, hey, you know what? You guys just pummel the hell out of each other and weaken both of you, and then in the wreckage, I'll come and elevate.
Yeah, I think the Turks certainly, the idea of the United States pulling out of the region, and then the Turks having this position militarily, but also to Turkey's relationship, its position in the world, just where it is, in the Black Sea, in the Mediterranean, and at that crossroads of Europe and Asia, it's always going to be an important country. It's just a question of how they leverage what comes out of this war in terms of remade order. There's, you have that Pakistani-Saudi military alliance, which I think most of us are still trying to figure out what the heck that means. The Pakistanis say one thing, the Saudis say another. But certainly this idea that alliance, that relationship, because alliance is probably too strong of a word, but that relationship, that agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia may be extended to Qatar and Turkey. And I haven't looked in the last week or so maybe that has gone away, or maybe it's happened. I don't know. But, this idea then of what does the region look like following this war, and the order that's being created as a result of this war. If there is a fracture in the American order, if the Americans have to abandon their bases in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, fall back essentially just to the Emiratis and to Israel, certainly that provides space then for a bloc within the Middle East. And you can imagine that'd be a pretty powerful bloc between Saudi Arabia and Qatar's wealth, the Turks and the Pakistani military capabilities, the size of both Turkey and Pakistan, their positions strategically, where they're located. That makes for a pretty formidable bloc. But does that make sense? Am I too much in the 20th century mind? Am I in my head? Am I playing Axis and Allies here? Right? Rather than, I don't know, whatever the version you play on your phone right now would be, right? Am I repeating the same 20th century mindset, looking at this and trying to establish things, very much? I criticize it all the time. Kissinger and Brzezinski, the whole idea of a grand chessboard. But I fall victim to that myself all the time. That's how I'm trying to analyze Turkey's position right now is in the scheme of this grand chessboard. And that's probably the wrong way to look at it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the chessboard is going to, and has for millennia been a chessboard. Just the rules of the game might change here and there.
Yeah.
And I imagine that this won't be any different than that. Just the rules will change. But one thing I think is pretty confident I can say is that the old rules and the old game are being destroyed before our eyes, and we will never, in my view, emerge from this in a position of dominance like we were on the 27th of February.
Right. And they, the point I think people strive to with Turkey is Turkey stay in NATO? Turkey has been rebuffed forever, going into the EU. The Europeans don't want the Turks in the EU, and the tension there, the hostility there because of that. And now everything the Turks have seen with regards to how NATO has conducted itself, how the Europeans conduct themselves, do the Turks want to be a part of that? What benefit are they getting from being a part of NATO? Now, certainly being a part of the American alliance and having the support from the Americans, I think the Turks still see value in that. So I don't think Incirlik Air Base is going to close up anytime soon, as you may see, say, Prince Sultan Air Base close up or something like that. But, so these are all, I think, big, interesting questions that are coming out of this war. We, of course, have to get to the end of this war.
Right.
And, of course, we have to calm ourselves down and remind ourselves that war is a breeding ground of unintended consequences. We don't know what we don't know what things are going to look like. That's why, again, I would caution the Iranians to take it slow, to exercise their strategic patience, to follow whatever plan they have, and not to retaliate against the Israelis in a manner that would bring them back into war. Or even though they do have, I think, the upper hand. I agree with you on that. Just in terms of how I look at it, I think that where they're heading right now, how they've done so well because they've exercised patience, they followed the plan, they've been very strategic in trying to attain their political objectives. And I think going back into full-fledged war, even though they might, because look, say they dominate the Israelis and the Americans, and they're basically able to hit Israeli air bases, destroy Israel's air force, say it goes that good for the Iranians, and then what do they get out of it though? I mean, what comes from that they don't get by exercising patience? At the same time too, I would fear that now you risk, if you do get to that point where you are dominating, is that when the Israelis use a nuclear weapon?
Well,
right?
yeah.
I mean, now you're getting all kinds. That's a whole other episode. Yeah, I know.
It is a whole nother episode, but it very much genuine concern and on the table here, as well as some recent reports that Pakistan has reportedly given a nuclear weapon to Iran. We'll see what's going to happen with that. That could just be a wild rumor.
Yeah,
it could be very much true. That could be why they're so confident right now. I don't know, but it is something that is possible.
Yeah, the Pakistanis have said it for years now that they would give a nuclear weapon to some. They would sell it one or give one or whatever. I mean, this is certainly. The Saudis claim the Pakistani nuclear umbrella covers them. I don't think I've ever seen the Pakistanis say that. But yeah, there's all types of things here. I think the Turks are likely to get a nuclear weapon. I don't know how if you're Turkey, you don't get a nuclear weapon after the last few years, witnessing all this. Witnessing all that you've happened. Like, you can't stand up to Israel. Why can't you stand up to Israel? Because Israel has a nuclear weapon. That's what it comes down to. And because of the problems the relationship with America brings. But yeah, so maybe you break from the Americans, you get a nuclear weapon, you join BRICS, and now you see Turkey performing and behaving in a way that you wouldn't have seen if Turkey kept its relationship with the U.S., stayed in NATO, and didn't get a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's what I'd advise the Turks to do.